Have you ever held a secret so dangerous that looking into the eyes of the man you love felt like signing your own death warrant? Genevieve knew that if the sun rose over Blackwood Manor, her life was over. She had the money, she had the map, and she had the cover of darkness. She was inches from freedom, her hand trembling on the cold brass handle of the service door. But she forgot one thing. The Duke of Westmore never sleeps. And when the lightning flashed, she realized she wasn't alone in the dark. The rain in Derbyshire did not wash things clean. It merely pressed the dirt deeper into the cobblestones. Inside Blackwood Manor, the silence was heavy, the kind of silence that cost a fortune to maintain. Genevieve hurriedly adjusted her starch-stiffened collar, catching her reflection in the darkened window of the nursery. She looked tired. Good. A governess should look tired. She should look plain worn and entirely invisible. She had spent 6 months perfecting the art of being invisible. She walked with a soft tread, she spoke only when spoken to, and she wore grey, always grey. But beneath the rough wool of her dress, her heart hammered a frantic rhythm that belonged to a terrified aristocrat, not a servant. "Miss Lauder," the voice came from the doorway, deep and resonating like a cello string struck in a cavern. Genevieve froze. She didn't turn immediately. She took a breath, counting to 3, willing her hands to stop shaking as she placed a wooden soldier back into the toy chest. When she turned, Sebastian Sterling, the Duke of Westmore, was filling the doorframe. He was a man composed of sharp angles and brooding shadows. His reputation in London was that of a cold, unfeeling industrialist, a man who cared more for his coal mines and shipping lanes than for society. But Genevieve knew the truth was more dangerous. He was observant. He saw things others missed. "Your Grace," she said, dropping a curtsy that was respectful, but not graceful. Grace drew attention. "I was just tidying up after young Leo. He is asleep." Sebastian stepped into the room. The nursery was the only place in the massive, drafty estate that felt warm, yet the Duke brought the chill of the hallway in with him. He walked past her, his boots making a heavy, deliberate sound on the floorboards. He stopped at the window, looking out at the storm battering the moors. "My nephew speaks highly of you, Miss Lauder," Sebastian said, his back to her. "He says you know stories about knights and kings that aren't in his books. I improvise, Your Grace, to keep him entertained." Sebastian turned slowly. The lamplight caught the sharp line of his jaw and the intense probing grey of his eyes. "You improvise well. My sister-in-law mentioned that, for a woman who claims to come from a farming village in the north, your French accent is impeccable, almost Parisian, most." Genevieve felt the blood drain from her face. She forced her hands to clasp in front of her apron to hide the trembling. This was the danger. Every day was a minefield. "My father. He had a collection of books, Your Grace. He believed education was important, even for a farmer's daughter." "A farmer with a library of French literature," Sebastian mused, taking a step closer. The air between them crackled. It wasn't just suspicion. It was an undeniable magnetic pull that terrified her. And hands that looked like they've never scrubbed a floor in their life. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he would grab her wrist. Instead, he reached past her to pick up a book she had left on the table. The Count of Monte Cristo. A story about a man in disguise seeking revenge. Sebastian read the spine. He looked at her, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Be careful, Miss Lauder. Fiction has a way of bleeding into reality in this house." He handed the book back to her. His fingers brushed hers, rough skin, against soft. The heat of the contact shot through her arm like a lightning bolt. She snatched the book back, perhaps too quickly. "I will keep that in mind, Your Grace." "Good night." "Good night, Genevieve." He used her first name. He never did that. As he walked out, leaving the scent of tobacco and rain in his wake, Genevieve sank onto the nursery rocking chair. Her legs gave out. He knows. The thought spiraled in her mind. Or he suspects. She looked down at her hands. He was right. She had rubbed them with ashes and dirt before her interview. But 6 months of indoor work had restored their softness. These were not the hands of Miss Lauder, the spinster governess. These were the hands of Lady Genevieve Harcourt, the runaway bride of the cruelest man in Sussex, Lord Reginald Hayes. Reginald wasn't just a scorned fiancé. He was a monster who viewed women as property. If he found her, he wouldn't just drag her back to the altar. He would punish her in ways that would make death seem like a mercy. And Sebastian. Sebastian was a duke. Men of his station stuck together. If he found out she was a runaway noblewoman, the law dictated he return her to her legal guardian. She couldn't stay. The attraction she felt for Sebastian, the way her breath hitched when he entered a room, the way she found herself watching him from the gallery, when he rode his stallion across the moors, was a trap. It was a beautiful golden cage. She had to leave. But not yet. She needed her wages. She needed just 1 more month of anonymity to buy passage to America. But as the thunder rolled outside, shaking the window panes, Genevieve didn't know that time had already run out. The following morning, the atmosphere in the servants' hall was buzzing. The cook, Mrs. Higgins, was slapping dough onto the table with vigorous enthusiasm, gossiping with the scullery maid. "I'm telling you it was the Royal Mail coach," Mrs. Higgins said, wiping flour onto her apron. "A special courier. Arrived at dawn. Urgent business for the Duke." Genevieve sat at the far end of the long wooden table, picking at her porridge. Her stomach was in knots. Couriers at dawn were never good news. "Probably business," said Thomas the footman, polishing silver. "They say the strike at the coal mines is getting worse." "No." Mrs. Higgins lowered her voice, leaning in. "I heard the valet talking. It's a private inquiry. From a lord in Sussex. Someone's gone missing, apparently. A lady. Stole family heirlooms and ran off." The spoon clattered out of Genevieve's hand, hitting the wooden bowl with a loud crack. Every head turned toward her. "Sorry," Genevieve whispered, her throat constricting. "Clumsy. My hand slipped." "You look pale, dear," Mrs. Higgins said, her motherly instinct kicking in. "Are you coming down with something? Just a headache?" "The storm kept me awake." Genevieve stood up, her legs feeling like lead. "I must go to Leo. He'll be waking soon." She rushed out of the kitchen, her heart pounding so hard it hurt her ribs. Sussex. It was Reginald. He was closing in. He had sent inquiries to the major houses. He was hunting her. She didn't go to the nursery. She went straight to the library. She knew Sebastian took his breakfast in the morning room at this hour. The library should be empty. She needed to see that letter. It was madness, it was reckless, but she had to know if her name was on that paper. The library was a cavernous room smelling of old leather and beeswax. The morning light filtered through the heavy velvet drapes. Genevieve moved quickly to the massive oak desk in the center of the room. Papers were scattered across it, mining reports, tenant complaints. And there, sitting atop a leather folio, was a letter with a broken wax seal. The seal of the Hayes family. A viper coiled around a dagger. Genevieve's hands shook uncontrollably as she reached for it. She picked it up, the parchment, heavy and expensive. Her eyes scanned the elegant, sharp handwriting she knew too well. Description of the fugitive, distinctly violet eyes, small scar above the left eyebrow, goes by the name of Genevieve. Reward of £5,000 for her return. She felt bile rise in her throat. £5,000. That was a fortune. A servant could live for 3 lifetimes on that money. Any one of the staff would turn her in. Sebastian would turn her in. "Reading my correspondence, Miss Lauder." The voice didn't come from the door. It came from the shadows of the high-backed armchair in the corner of the room. Genevieve gasped, dropping the letter. It fluttered to the desk like a dying bird. Sebastian stood up. He hadn't been at breakfast. He had been here watching, waiting. He wore a dark smoking jacket, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes dark with lack of sleep and fury. Genevieve stepped back, hitting the edge of the desk. "I was looking for fresh paper, for Leo's drawing." "Don't lie to me," Sebastian growled. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He didn't look like a civilized duke now. He looked like a predator. He slammed his hand down on the desk right next to the letter trapping her. "You were reading this," he said, his voice dangerously low. He picked up the letter. "Lord Hayes is looking for his runaway fiancée, a woman who stole from him, a woman with violet eyes." He looked at her. Really looked at her. Genevieve had been careful to keep her eyes downcast or in the shadows, but now with the morning sun hitting her face, there was no hiding the unusual striking violet hue of her irises. "Look at me," he commanded. Genevieve slowly lifted her gaze, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. She was trapped. "Tell me." Sebastian whispered, his face inches from hers. "Are you a thief, Miss Lauder?" "I took nothing that wasn't mine," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "And I am not Miss Lauder." "No," Sebastian said softly. His anger seemed to shift into something else, something more complex, more painful. "You are Lady Genevieve, the woman all of London is whispering about. If you are going to turn me in," Genevieve said, tears finally spilling over, "do it now. Send for the constable. But do not send me back to him. I would rather die in Newgate Prison than go back to Reginald Hayes." The vulnerability in her voice seemed to strike him. The hardness in his eyes fractured. He looked at her mouth, then at the tears on her cheeks. For a moment, Genevieve thought he might kiss her. The tension was unbearable, a mix of fear and a desperate, burning desire. "You think I would send you back for money?" Sebastian asked, his voice rough. "I think you are a duke," she replied, "and dukes follow the law." "I'm not like other men, Genevieve." He said her name again. It sounded like a prayer and a curse, "and you are not a governess." He stepped back, breaking the spell. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Get out of here. Go to the nursery. Stay there." "What are you going to do?" she asked, terrified. "I don't know," he admitted, not looking at her. "But Lord Hayes is a powerful man. If he is hunting you, he won't stop at a letter. He will come here. And if he finds you under my roof—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If she was found here, Sebastian would be implicated in harboring a fugitive. She would ruin him. Genevieve fled the library. She didn't go to the nursery. She went to her small room in the attic. She pulled her battered suitcase from under the bed. Sebastian hadn't turned her in yet, but he hadn't promised to protect her either. He was conflicted, and a conflicted man could be swayed by duty or by threats from a powerful peer like Reginald. She couldn't take the risk. She couldn't drag Sebastian down with her, and she couldn't face Reginald again. She packed her few belongings. Her hands were steady now. The fear had been replaced by a cold resolve. She would wait until nightfall. When the house was asleep, when the shift changed between the night watchmen, she would slip out the side service door. She knew the path through the woods to the train station in the village. She had to leave before sunrise. But as the day wore on, the storm outside intensified, mirroring the storm inside Blackwood Manor. And Genevieve had no idea that Sebastian had given orders to the guards not to keep intruders out, but to keep her in. The grandfather clock in the main hall struck 2. Its deep, resonant chime vibrating through the floorboards like a heartbeat slowing down. The house was finally asleep, or at least it pretended to be. Genevieve stood in the center of her small attic room, shivering though she wore her heaviest cloak. In her pocket, wrapped in oilcloth, was the map she had stolen from Reginald's safe the night she fled, a map not to treasure, but to a hidden ledger buried in a crypt in York. It was the evidence that proved Reginald wasn't just a cruel lord. He was a smuggler and a traitor to the crown. That piece of paper was her insurance, but it was also the reason he would kill her without hesitation. She blew out her candle. Darkness swallowed the room, save for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the peeling wallpaper. She moved. Every step was a calculation. The servants' staircase was narrow and steep, the wood groaning underfoot like an old man's bones. Genevieve descended with the grace of a ghost, pressing herself against the rough plaster walls whenever the wind howled, masking the sound of her movements. She reached the ground floor. The kitchen was empty, the copper pots gleaming dully in the embers of the hearth. The smell of rising dough and stale pipe tobacco hung in the air. She bypassed the main doors. They would be barred and bolted. Her target was the scullery door, the one used for deliveries. It had a simple latch. She reached the door. Her hand, gloved in worn leather, gripped the cold iron handle. Freedom, she thought. Just turn the handle, run into the rain, and don't look back. She turned the latch. It clicked. She pushed. The door didn't move. Panic flared in her chest, hot and sharp. She pushed harder. It was locked from the outside. That was impossible. The scullery maid never locked it until morning deliveries. "Going somewhere, Lady Genevieve." The voice didn't come from behind her. It came from the darkness of the pantry alcove to her left. Genevieve spun around her back, hitting the unyielding wood of the door. A match flared the sudden light, blinding her for a second. As the flames settled, it illuminated the face of Sebastian Sterling. He wasn't dressed for sleep. He was dressed for riding high boots, a heavy, dark coat, his cravat loose around his neck. He looked wild, dangerous, and utterly exhausted. "Let me go," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "Please, Sebastian. If I stay, I endanger everyone." "You think the lock is to keep you in?" Sebastian asked, stepping out of the alcove. The candlelight cast long, dancing shadows across his face, making his scar, a faint white line on his cheek, stand out. "Do you think I am your jailer? You locked the door." "I locked it because his men are already in the woods," Sebastian said. The words hit her like a physical blow. Genevieve slid down the door until she hit the floor. Her knees pulled to her chest. "He's here. His scouts are—" Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a low rumble as he knelt in front of her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was overwhelming. "I have gamekeepers patrolling the perimeter. They spotted 3 men on horseback near the East Bridge an hour ago. They are watching the exits, Genevieve. If you had walked out that door, you would have been in a sack and on a horse back to Sussex before you reached the tree line." Genevieve looked up at him, her violet eyes wide with terror. Then I am trapped. He will come with a warrant in the morning. You saw the letter. He has the law on his side. The law is a flexible thing when you have enough money, Sebastian said bitterly. And Reginald Hayes has plenty of both. Why are you helping me? She demanded, her voice cracking. You barely know me. I am a deception. A lie walking in a governess's dress. Why risk your reputation, your home, for a stranger? Sebastian reached out then. His hand, large and warm, cupped her cheek. The touch was shocking in its tenderness. He used his thumb to wipe away a smear of dust from her face. Because, he said, his eyes searching hers. I saw the way you looked at Leo when he had a fever. I saw the way you fixed the broken wing of that sparrow in the garden. You have a kindness in you that this world tries to destroy. And, he paused, his gaze dropping to her lips. Because when you walked into my library yesterday and stood up to me, you were the first person in 10 years who made me feel alive. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and electric. Genevieve's heart hammered against her ribs, but this time it wasn't from fear. I have something, she whispered. That's why he's hunting me. Not just for pride. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the oilcloth packet. She handed it to him. Sebastian took it, unfolding the map and the notes scribbled on the back. He scanned it in the dim light of the match, his brow furrowing. A ledger, he muttered. Smuggling routes, bribes to port officials. He looked up, a sharp, predatory grin forming on his face. This isn't just theft, Genevieve. This is treason. If Hayes is caught with this, he doesn't get a bride. He gets a hangman's noose. That is why he will burn this house down to get to me, she said. Let him try, Sebastian said, standing up and pulling her to her feet. He thinks he is hunting a helpless girl. He doesn't know he's walked into a wolf's den. He blew out the match. Come with me, he commanded in the dark. You can't stay in the attic. It's the first place they will look if they breach the house. Where are we going? To the one place no one dares to enter without my permission. He took her hand. His grip was iron-strong, possessive. And for the first time since she fled Sussex, Genevieve didn't feel like prey. She felt protected. The Duke's private chambers occupied the entire east wing of Blackwood Manor. It was a sanctuary of masculine luxury. Mahogany panels, heavy emerald drapes, and a fireplace large enough to roast a stag. Sebastian led her inside and locked the heavy oak door. He moved to the fireplace, stirring the dying embers into a roaring blaze. You will sleep here, he said, gesturing to the massive four-poster bed. And you? Genevieve asked, standing awkwardly by the door, clutching her small bag. I will sit by the fire, he said, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. I don't intend to sleep tonight. Genevieve walked slowly toward the fire. The warmth began to seep into her frozen bones. She looked at Sebastian. He had shed his coat and was rolling up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing strong forearms. He looked weary, burdened by the weight of his title. And now her safety. Sebastian, she said softly. He turned, glass in hand. The firelight caught the amber liquid and the intensity in his eyes. You should rest, he said gruffly. I can't. She stepped closer. You hold the evidence now. You know what he is. But you don't know what he did to me. Sebastian went still. Tell me. He didn't just want a wife, she said, staring into the flames. He wanted a trophy. He kept me locked in the tower of his estate for 3 months before the wedding. He told me that my spirit was a weed that needed to be pruned. She unconsciously rubbed her left wrist where a faint old bruise still lingered. He said he would break me until I was nothing but a reflection of his will. A glass shattered. Genevieve jumped. Sebastian had gripped his tumbler so hard it had snapped in his hand. Whiskey and blood dripped onto the Persian rug. "He touched you." Sebastian's voice was a low growl vibrating with a terrifying rage. "He tried," she whispered. "I escaped the night before the wedding." Sebastian ignored the blood on his hand. He crossed the distance between them in a second, gripping her shoulders. "He will never touch you again. Do you hear me? I will dismantle his estate brick by brick before I let him near you." The intensity of his promise broke something inside her. The dam she had built to hold back her terror and her loneliness crumbled. She leaned into him, burying her face in his chest. He smelled of rain, whiskey, and safety. Sebastian's arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him. One hand tangled in her hair, the other pressed against the small of her back. It wasn't a gentle embrace. It was desperate. It was the embrace of a man who had found something precious and was terrified of losing it. She looked up her face inches from his. His eyes were dark, dilated. The air in the room grew thick, charged with the undeniable pull that had existed since the moment they met in the nursery. "Genevieve," he breathed. He lowered his head. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, a question. She answered by rising on her tiptoes, pressing closer. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, consuming. It was a kiss of defiance against the storm outside, against the danger, against the world, that said a duke could not love a runaway. For a moment there was no Reginald, no map, no danger. There was only the fire, the taste of whiskey on his tongue, and the rough warmth of his hands. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed through the manor like a gunshot. They broke apart, chests heaving. The sound came from the main entrance downstairs, the heavy iron knocker being slammed against the door. "Open up! In the name of the king." The voice was muffled by the stone walls but unmistakable. It was the sheriff, and beneath that voice, Genevieve heard another, a smooth, oily baritone that made her blood run cold. "Break it down if you have to, Sheriff. I know she's in there." Reginald. Sebastian's face hardened into a mask of stone. The lover was gone. The Duke had returned. He went to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a heavy black revolver. He checked the chamber, spinning it with a metallic click. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "Do not open this door for anyone but me. If I knock 3 times, it is me. If anyone else tries to enter..." He handed her a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. "Aim for the head." "Sebastian, don't," she pleaded, gripping his arm. "He has the sheriff. If you draw a weapon on an officer of the law, you'll be arrested." "I am the Duke of Westmore," Sebastian said, his eyes cold as the winter sea. "On this land, I am the law." He kissed her forehead, a quick, hard press of his lips, and turned to the door. "Wait," she said. "The map. Take it." Sebastian shook his head. "No. If they search me, they find it. Keep it hidden on your body. It is your only leverage if I fail." "You won't fail," she said, trying to believe it. He gave her a grim nod and slipped out into the corridor, locking the door behind him. Genevieve stood alone in the center of the massive room. The pounding downstairs continued, accompanied by the shouting of confused servants. She heard the heavy front doors groan open. She rushed to the window, peering through the crack in the drapes. The storm had broken slightly, the moon casting a pale, sickly light over the driveway. Below, a black carriage with the haze crest stood waiting. 4 men on horseback surrounded it, holding torches that hissed in the drizzle. But it was the figure standing on the front steps that made her stop breathing. Lord Reginald Hayes stood there, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, tapping a silver-tipped cane against the stone. He looked like a viper waiting to strike. And then Sebastian walked out. He didn't yell. He didn't run. He stood at the top of the stairs, hands behind his back, looking down at the intruders with supreme arrogance. Genevieve cracked the window open, just an inch to hear. "Lord Hayes," Sebastian's voice rang out, cutting through the wind. "To what do I owe the displeasure of this intrusion at 3 in the morning? Cut the pleasantries, Westmore," Reginald spat. "You are harboring a thief and a fugitive. I have a warrant to search this property." "A warrant?" Sebastian laughed, a cold, dry sound. "You have a piece of paper signed by a village magistrate who owes you gambling debts. It has no authority over a peer of the realm." "I have authority," the sheriff shouted, stepping forward nervously. "Your Grace, we have witness reports. A woman matching the description serves as your governess." Sebastian took a step down. The torchlight flickered on his face. "My governess is a woman named Miss Lauder. She is asleep. And if you wake my nephew with this racket, I will have your badge, Sheriff. And then I will have your house." Reginald stepped forward, his face twisting into a sneer. "You are bluffing, Sterling. I know she is here. And I know you have the ledger." The mention of the ledger changed everything. Sebastian stiffened imperceptibly. Reginald knew about the map. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sebastian said calmly. "Don't you?" Reginald signaled to one of his men. The man dismounted and dragged someone out from behind the carriage. It was Thomas, the footman. He had been beaten. His face was swollen, blood dripping from his lip. Genevieve gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Your man here was caught trying to send a telegram in the village an hour ago," Reginald said smoothly, poking Thomas with his cane. "He was quite chatty after a few persuasions. He told us about the governess with the French accent. He told us you were looking at her quite fondly." Sebastian's hand twitched toward the gun concealed in his coat. "So," Reginald smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth, "you can step aside and let me retrieve my property, or I can burn this house down with you inside it. I have 20 men in these woods, Westmore. How many do you have? An old butler and a cook?" Sebastian looked at Thomas, then at Reginald. He was outmanned. Violence would get his servants killed. "Fine," Sebastian said, his voice like ice. "Search the house. But if you break so much as a teacup, I will challenge you to a duel and put a bullet between your eyes." Reginald laughed. "After you, Sheriff." Genevieve backed away from the window, her heart racing so fast she thought she might faint. They were coming in. Sebastian couldn't stop them. She looked around the room frantically. Under the bed? No, too obvious. The wardrobe, numb. Her eyes landed on the wall beside the fireplace. There was a tapestry hanging there depicting a hunting scene. Sebastian had mentioned once that this house was built during the Civil War. Old houses had secrets. She ran to the tapestry and tore it aside. Behind it was wood paneling. She ran her hands over the grooves, looking for a catch, a lever, anything. Click. A section of the paneling sprang loose. A priest hole. A tiny, dusty space between the walls used to hide Catholic priests during the Reformation. She scrambled inside, pulling the panel shut just as she heard the key turn in the lock of the bedroom door. She was in total darkness. The air was stale and dry. Through the thin wood of the panel, she heard the door crash open. "She's not here," a rough voice said. "Check the bed. Check the wardrobe." Reginald's voice commanded. He was in the room. He was inches away from her. She held her breath, clutching the map to her chest, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. "The bed is warm," Reginald murmured. "She was here. Moments ago." Silence. Then a slow, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Reginald's cane hitting the wall. He was walking the perimeter of the room. Tap, tap. He was getting closer to the fireplace. Tap. He stopped right in front of the hidden panel. "Duke," Reginald said, his voice muffled but terrifyingly clear. "Why is this tapestry crooked? Why is this tapestry crooked?" Reginald repeated his voice, silky with suspicion. Inside the wall, Genevieve pressed her hands over her mouth, her breath hitching in her throat. She could hear the scratch of the cane against the fabric on the other side. She was inches away from discovery. The dust in the narrow space tickled her nose, and she squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the urge to sneeze. In the room, Sebastian didn't flinch. He poured another drink, the sound of liquid hitting crystal echoing in the tense silence. "It covers a draft, Hayes," Sebastian said, his tone bored. "This house was built in the 15th century. It leaks heat like a sieve. If you move it, you'll let in the damp. But by all means ruin my decor. I'll simply bill you for the restoration." Reginald hesitated. The cane paused. Sebastian took a sip of his whiskey, then added, "Unless you think I've hidden a grown woman behind a piece of cloth. Does she flatten herself like a sheet of paper? Or perhaps you think I'm a magician?" The sheriff chuckled nervously. "He has a point, my lord. There's no space there for a person." Reginald grunted, his pride stung by the mockery. He pulled his cane back. "Check the balcony," he snapped at his men. "And the adjoining dressing room." The footsteps moved away. Genevieve let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like an eternity. But she knew she wasn't safe. Reginald wouldn't leave until he had torn the house apart. She couldn't stay in the priest hole. It was too small, and if they tapped the panels again, they would hear the hollow sound. She remembered Sebastian's words. The house has secrets. She felt along the rough brickwork of the inner wall. The air was colder here, smelling of earth and centuries of decay. Her fingers brushed against a rusted iron rung. A ladder. It led downward into the bowels of the manor. She had no choice. She hooked her arm through the rung, clutching the oilcloth packet with the map against her chest, and began to descend into the pitch black. Down she went past the first floor, the air growing heavier and damper. The sounds of the search above boots on floorboards. Shouting voices faded into a dull thrum. After descending about 20 feet, her foot hit solid stone. She was in a narrow tunnel. She felt her way forward, the rough walls scraping her knuckles. She didn't know where it led, but she hoped it was a way out. Suddenly a beam of light cut through the darkness ahead. Genevieve froze. Had they found the tunnel? She crept forward, silent as a mouse. The light wasn't a lantern. It was coming through a decorative iron grate set into the wall. She peered through it. She gasped softly. She was looking directly into the grand hall of the manor. The grate was concealed behind a large suit of armor on the mezzanine level. From this vantage point, she could see everything happening below, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The servants had been rounded up. Mrs. Higgins, the cook, was weeping into her apron. Thomas the footman was slumped in a chair, his face a mask of blood and bruises. The other maids were huddled together, trembling, but it was the figure in the center of the room that stopped Genevieve's heart. Little Leo. The 7-year-old boy was standing in his nightshirt, clutching a teddy bear. He looked small and terrified, surrounded by Reginald's rough-looking men. Sebastian was there too. He was being held back by 2 burly guards, his face twisted in fury. "Let the boy go, Hayes," Sebastian roared, struggling against the men holding him. "He is a child. He knows nothing." Reginald stood before Leo, twirling his cane. He looked like a giant looming over the boy. "He is your heir, is he not?" Reginald asked casually. "Since you have no children of your own, this boy is the future duke." "This is between you and me," Sebastian spat. "Leave my nephew out of it." "But he is part of it," Reginald said, crouching down to look Leo in the eye. "Tell me, little one, have you seen the pretty lady, the one who tells you stories?" Leo's lip trembled. He looked at his uncle, then back at the scary man with the cane. Miss Lauder. Yes, Miss Lauder." Reginald smiled, a cruel twist of lips. "Where is she hiding, boy? If you tell me, I'll give you a gold coin." I don't know," Leo whispered. Reginald stood up, his face hardening. He turned to the sheriff. "Arrest the boy." "What?" The sheriff looked shocked. "My lord, you can't arrest a child. On what charge?" "Aiding and abetting a fugitive," Reginald declared loudly, "and conspiracy to commit treason. If the uncle won't speak, perhaps a night in the village jail will loosen the boy's tongue." "You are mad." Sebastian lunged forward, throwing one guard off, but the second one struck him in the back of the knees with a baton. Sebastian fell to the floor with a grunt of pain. Reginald placed a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. The boy started to cry. "I will give you to the count of 3. Westmore," Reginald said, looking down at the fallen duke. "Tell me where she is, or the boy comes with me. And accidents happen so easily in prison cells." 1. Genevieve gripped the iron bars of the grate until her fingers turned white. 2. Sebastian looked up. He was beaten. He couldn't let them take Leo. He opened his mouth to speak, to give her up. Genevieve couldn't let him do it. She couldn't let Sebastian destroy his honor, and she certainly couldn't let an innocent child pay the price for her freedom. She turned from the grate and ran back to the ladder. She didn't climb up. She found a latch on the wall next to the grate, a mechanism to open the secret door behind the armor. She pulled it. With a grinding of stone and metal, the wall beside the suit of armor on the mezzanine swung open. Genevieve stepped out onto the balcony, the candlelight from the chandelier below illuminating her. She looked wild, her hair loose, her dress streaked with dust, her eyes burning with violet fire. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the vaulted hall. Every head turned upward. "I am here," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Let the boy go." Silence descended on the grand hall. It was absolute, heavy and suffocating. Reginald looked up, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto her. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he drawled. "The bird has flown from her cage." He signaled to his men. They released Leo. The boy ran to Mrs. Higgins, burying his face in her skirts. Sebastian scrambled to his feet. He looked up at Genevieve, his expression a mixture of devastation and awe. "Genevieve, no go back." "I am done running, Sebastian," she said, gripping the railing of the balcony. She looked down at Reginald. "You want me? Here I am. But first order your men to leave the house. Leave the staff and the Duke alone." You are hardly in a position to make demands, my dear. Reginald laughed. Sheriff, seize her. Wait. Genevieve reached into her bodice and pulled out the oilcloth packet. She held it over the railing, dangling it precariously over the open flames of the wall sconce below. I have the map, she shouted. The one to the crypt in York, the one that details every shipment of illegal French brandy and stolen opium you've brought into this country for the last 5 years. The room gasped. The sheriff looked at Reginald, his eyes wide. Treason. That was a hanging offense. Reginald's smile vanished. His face went pale, then red with rage. That is a lie, Reginald snarled. That is stolen property. Is it? Genevieve challenged. Shall I read the dates? October 14th, the schooner Lady Jane docked at midnight. You didn't just steal from the Crown, Reginald. You sold military secrets to pay for your gambling debts. It's all here. Burn it, Reginald commanded, his voice tight. Burn it, and I might show you mercy. If I burn it, the copy I mailed to the Home Office in London 3 days ago will still arrive on the Prime Minister's desk. She lied. It was a desperate gamble. There was no copy. There was only this dirty piece of paper in her hand. Reginald hesitated. He was a gambler, and he was trying to calculate the odds. You are bluffing, he said. You were a farmer's daughter before I found you. You don't have the connections to mail anything to the Home Office. I am the Duke's governess, she shot back. I have access to the Royal Mail. She saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. She had him. Let them go, she repeated. Take me, take the map, but leave this house. Reginald stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. Come down. The map for the boy's safety. And the Duke's. No, Sebastian shouted. Genevieve, don't trust him. He will kill you the moment he has it. Be quiet, Westmore, Reginald snapped, pulling a pistol from his coat and aiming it at Sebastian's chest. Another word, and I create a vacancy in the peerage. Genevieve walked down the grand staircase. Her legs felt like water, but she held her head high. She descended like a queen walking to the guillotine. When she reached the bottom step, Reginald holstered his gun and held out his hand. The map, my love. Genevieve looked at Sebastian one last time. His grey eyes were filled with a torture she couldn't bear to witness. Forgive me, she mouthed. She placed the packet in Reginald's hand. He snatched it, tearing it open to check the contents. He scanned the paper, satisfied. He shoved it into his inner pocket. Excellent, he said. Sheriff, take her, and burn this house to the ground. What? The sheriff stepped back. My lord, we have the girl. You said, I said I would leave if she gave me the map. Reginald sneered. I lied. Did you really think I would leave witnesses Westmore has seen too much? The boy has seen too much. He turned to his men, a chaotic mix of hired thugs and corrupt deputies. Kill them all. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. You monster! Genevieve screamed, launching herself at him. Reginald backhanded her with brutal force. She went flying, crashing into the side of the stairs. The world spun. Sebastian roared a sound of pure primal rage. He didn't care about the gun. He didn't care about the odds. He charged. He hit Reginald like a freight train, tackling him to the ground. The gun skittered across the marble floor. Fight! Sebastian yelled to his servants. Fight for your lives! Chaos erupted. Thomas, despite his injuries, grabbed a heavy silver candelabra and swung it at a guard. Mrs. Higgins threw a pot of hot tea into another man's face. The grand hall turned into a battlefield. Sebastian and Reginald were rolling on the floor, exchanging brutal blows. Reginald was younger and heavier, but Sebastian was fighting for Genevieve. He landed a punch that cracked Reginald's nose, blood spraying onto the white marble. But Reginald found his cane. He brought the heavy silver handle down on Sebastian's temple. Crack. Sebastian collapsed, stunned blood pouring from his head. Reginald scrambled up, panting, wiping blood from his face. He looked around. His men were struggling against the surprisingly fierce servants, but the sheriff had drawn his revolver. "Enough!" Reginald shouted, grabbing Genevieve by the hair and hauling her up. He pulled a knife from his boot and pressed it to her throat. "Back off!" he screamed, "or I cut her throat right here." The fighting stopped. Thomas lowered the candelabra. Mrs. Higgins froze. Sebastian groaned, trying to push himself up, his vision swimming. "You lose Westmore," Reginald spat, dragging Genevieve toward the heavy oak front doors. "I have the map. I have the girl. And you have a headache." He kicked the doors open. The storm outside was raging harder than ever. The wind howled like a banshee, blowing rain into the hall. "Move!" Reginald shouted to his men. "To the carriages! We take her to the coast tonight!" He dragged Genevieve out into the night. The rain instantly soaked them. She clawed at his arm, but his grip was iron. "You can't escape," she sobbed. "I already have," Reginald hissed in her ear. "By sunrise we will be on a boat to France, and you will learn exactly what happens to wives who disobey." He dragged her toward the waiting black carriage. The horses were stamping nervously in the thunder. Genevieve looked back at the manor. She saw Sebastian stumble out onto the porch, swaying, blood masking one side of his face. He looked like a fallen king. "Sebastian!" She screamed, her voice torn away by the wind. Reginald shoved her inside the carriage and climbed in after her. He slammed the door. "Drive!" he yelled to the driver. The whip cracked. The carriage lurched forward, mud spewing from the wheels. Inside the dark carriage, Reginald pinned her against the seat, his knife still in hand. He was laughing a manic, terrified sound. "We did it," he muttered. "We're free." Genevieve huddled in the corner, her heart breaking. She had failed. She had given up the map, she had endangered Sebastian, and now she was going back to hell. But as the carriage sped down the long, winding driveway toward the main gates, a flash of lightning illuminated the road ahead, and Genevieve saw it. Standing in the middle of the road, blocking the only exit from the estate, was a massive figure on a black stallion. It wasn't Sebastian. Sebastian was bleeding on the porch. The figure wore a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He held a Winchester rifle resting easily on his thigh, and behind him, stepping out from the tree line, were 50 men. Not soldiers, not police, miners, colliers from the Duke's mines, their faces black with coal dust, holding pickaxes, sledgehammers, and iron bars. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of soot and muscle blocking the road completely. The carriage driver pulled hard on the reins, screeching to a halt just feet from the black stallion. Reginald looked out the window, his eyes bulging. "What is this? Who are these people?" The man on the stallion rode forward slowly to the carriage window. He tilted his hat back. It was the foreman of the mines, a giant of a man named Big Jack Kincaid. "Road's closed." Jack grumbled, his voice like grinding rocks. "I am Lord Hayes," Reginald shrieked. "Move aside." "Don't know no Lord Hayes," Jack said calmly, cocking the lever of his rifle. "But we heard the Duke was in trouble, and when the Duke calls—" Jack looked back at the wall of miners. "The mountain answers." The carriage door was ripped open not by Reginald, but by the massive, calloused hand of Big Jack. Before Reginald could raise his knife, the handle of a miner's pickaxe smashed into his wrist, shattering the blade and the bone. Reginald howled a sound that was quickly swallowed by the storm as he was dragged out into the mud. He lay there gasping, looking up at a circle of 50 soot-covered faces. These were men who spent their lives in the dark. They were not afraid of a lord in a velvet coat. Sebastian arrived moments later. He was leaning heavily on Thomas, his face pale and bloodied, but his eyes burned with a cold, triumphant fire. He looked down at the shivering Lord Hayes. "I told you," Sebastian rasped, wiping rain from his eyes. "I am the law here." The sheriff, seeing the army of miners and realizing his political career and perhaps his life hung in the balance, wisely decided his loyalty lay with the Duke. He stepped forward, snapping iron handcuffs onto Reginald's wrists. "Lord Reginald Hayes," the sheriff stammered, "you are under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and suspect of treason." Big Jack retrieved the oilcloth packet from the mud and handed it to Sebastian. But Sebastian didn't care about the map. He dropped it into his pocket and limped toward the open carriage door. Genevieve tumbled out, soaked and trembling. She didn't wait for him to reach her. She ran to him. He caught her wincing in pain as his ribs protested, but he refused to let go. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her rain-soaked hair. "You came," she whispered, looking over his shoulder at the wall of silent, protective miners. "They came," Sebastian corrected, pulling back to look at her. "I just gave the order to protect what is mine." He used his thumb to trace the line of her jaw. His touch incredibly gentle for a man who had just brawled for his life. "And you, Genevieve, are mine, if you'll have me." "I have nothing to offer you, Sebastian," she cried softly. "I have no name, no dowry." "You have my heart," he said, his voice breaking. "And you have my life. Without you, this manor is just a tomb." There in the driving rain, illuminated by the lightning and the miners' torches, he kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss of goodbye, but a promise of forever. 6 months later, the gloom of Blackwood Manor had vanished. The heavy velvet drapes were pulled back, letting the summer sun flood the grand hall. And in the nursery, the new Duchess of Westmore didn't just tell stories about knights saving princesses. She told Leo the story of a wolf, a farmer's daughter, and the night the mountain moved to save them. What a journey, from a terrified governess hiding in the shadows to the Duchess of Westmore. Genevieve finally found the safety and love she deserved. I hope you loved that final twist with the miners. It just goes to show that true power isn't about titles or money. It's about the loyalty you earn from the people around you. Reginald thought he could buy the law, but he couldn't buy the mountain. If this story made your heart race, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more high-stakes historical romances like this one. What did you think of Sebastian's character arc? Do you think he waited too long to act, or did he do the right thing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell turned on. I have a new story coming next week about a mail-order bride who finds something shocking in her husband's barn. And trust me, you won't want to miss that secret. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.